Well, happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody who's joined us today. You'll be happy to know that the theme tower outside of Pepperdine has now been set to Christmas music. So every half hour, I get a little bit of a chime for Frosty the Snowman or Jingle Bells, or the entire Malibu community can hear Pepperdine celebrating the season. We are here today to continue that celebration for Cocoa with Jim, along with alumni from Seaver College, Jacki Kelley. Jacki is CEO for Dentsu for the Americas, just a huge advertising company that does quite a bit of work with 85 of the top 100 companies in the country, actually in the world. So let's start this process. Jacki, thank you for coming. It's great to have you with us today.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Are you coming to us from home or from your office?
I'm coming to you from home, which is my office these days, in Connecticut.
Yeah, I'm sure, like many of our listeners out there, home is office.
Yeah.
For a big part of this time period. Well, let's talk about how you got to Pepperdine. Tell us, did you grow up in Connecticut, or how did you end up at Pepperdine? Tell us the story of your journey to Pepperdine.
Oh, I'd love to. So I grew up in Colorado. I am a 5th generation cattle rancher. So Pepperdine was not an obvious choice. And one day, well, I knew I wanted to go into marketing, business marketing, communications. I knew that area. I'd interned in high school at the local PBS station and a couple of other media companies, and had liked that work. So I knew I wanted to move into that, and knew that Pepperdine was a good school for that. But I was flipping through the guide to New York Times Guide to Colleges, seated next to my dad, and I saw a picture of Pepperdine. And like many of us, you see a picture of Pepperdine in it, and it sort of calls you. And so I announced from my chair that day that that's where I was going to go. And my dad has encouraged me in almost everything, but he looked at the qualifications and said, "I love you, honey, but you may not be able to get in." And that was sort of like putting the red flag in front of me to say, now I definitely was going to get in. But I assumed that I would live in Colorado the rest of my life. So I really wanted to go someplace very different for college, and still consider it such a privilege that ended up being Pepperdine.
And what did you study here?
Organizational communications with a minor in marketing.
Excellent. Well, talk to us about your time here at Pepperdine. What were you involved in? What was it like? Did you study abroad?
I did not study abroad. It's actually, I try not to have a lot of regrets in life, but I would have loved to have studied abroad. Especially now, your programs are even richer than they were. I think when I was there, Heidelberg was the primary choice. So I didn't get to do that. But I was a joiner in lots of other ways. I was a resident assistant. I needed to work to cover the cost of Pepperdine. So being an RA gave me the opportunity to get my free room and board, and a great chance to mentor and work with younger students. I was a Theta, a very proud Theta. Shout out to all the daisy wearing Thetas out there. I was a SIGEP little sister. I was the operator. I used to work at night and said, "Good evening, Pepperdine University. How can I direct your call?" And participated in Songfest and lots of. I consider Pepperdine to be really rich for me in terms of the many things I was able to participate in.
Excellent. Well, one of the things that we had talked about that you participated in was a particular internship at the USA Today. So tell us about how that came about, and then what you kind of learned from there, and where that led you in your career.
Yeah, so I always encourage young people to do internships, because it was so life-changing for me. I guess it would have been in the fall of my senior year, my marketing professor made an announcement that an alumni from Pepperdine had an internship at USA Today. And who was interested, and everybody's hands went up. And back then, the media landscape had changed, but in late 80s, USA Today was really changing the way that national newspapers. It was the first national newspaper, it was the first in color, very differentiated printing capability. So it was a really interesting place to be. All the hands went up. And then he said it was in Glendale. Some hands went down. You had to be there by 8 a.m. A lot of hands went down. and it won't pay anything. And all the hands went down except mine. So I was sort of the last man standing. It was a great internship because the alumni, a wonderful woman named Margaret, worked very hard to make it meaningful work. She gave me meaty projects that really gave me a chance to understand what it would be like to work in that organization. And I stayed there for 18 years. I was teased when I left USA Today 18 years later that I was the longest living intern, but it turned into a great career.
Well, talk to us about your career progression at USA Today, and then we'll kind of move beyond there.
So at USA Today, I worked, again, I was there for 18 years and I worked in 9 different roles. So every 2 years, I ended up shifting to new roles. And I kind of have learned, I'm one of those people that if I'm not learning, I kind of have to shift. And so USA Today had a good cadence for me because just about the time I was getting a bit antsy, and wanted to do something new, I had that opportunity. And I worked, the first 9 years was in circulation or distribution, which is where if you're in print, magazines, newspapers, that industry, which again has changed a lot. Much of that has shifted to digital, but back then distribution is a really, it's the meat and potatoes of the business. And then the last 9 years I moved to advertising, which is where I began to understand advertising and the nuances of that.
Excellent. So what prompted your move from USA Today? Where'd you go from there? And then kind of trace your career path from there to your current role as CEO for Dentsu.
Sure. So 18 years at USA Today, it's, when it was 2003 or 4, obviously the industry was changing. And Gannett, to its credit, had pushed a lot of things online. And had invested in digital acquisitions and changes, but we weren't changing fast enough. And my concern is that consumers were moving so fast to other platforms that I needed to, as a contributor to the industry, I needed to sharpen my skills there. So I decided I wanted to move into a digitally focused media company. And I started researching which ones would be best. And back then, and again, I keep saying back then as if it's, the 1900s, but Google and Yahoo were the two that were really building brands on the web. Google was doing it through search. So a very, performance-based approach, sort of bottom of the funnel, if you think about marketing, and Yahoo was doing it at the top. Yahoo was helping to educate brands on how do you build brands on the web. And so I chose Yahoo and I relocated. At the time we were living in DC. So a young family, my daughter at the time was 4 or 3 actually. And I never really wanted to live in New York. A daughter of a cattle rancher doesn't find themselves or doesn't think about, New York City as a place they want to live. But I went because of the work, the real interesting roles in advertising. Many of them at that time were in New York. So relocated. And I always tell people it was probably one of the most interesting times in my career because I went from 18 years of equity and knowledge at an organization to being a beginner again. And I think it's really important for all of us to become beginners again. It tests you in new ways and you learn a lot about yourself. But I was there for just about 2 years. And the woman that I went there to work for, which I really loved working with, I wasn't done learning from her. She's an incredible visionary in the industry, went to be the CEO of Martha Stewart. And she asked me if I would come with her and run the advertising operation there, which was an incredible opportunity because Martha is an interesting brand in and of herself. She's an influencer, obviously, but she owned her own magazine. She owned her own TV production. She owned her own website. She had a huge licensing business, which she still does with different brands and manufacturers. And so it was really a broad role across all that capability. And she taught me a lot about a lot of things. She's an incredible entrepreneur. And then I got a phone call when I was at Martha Stewart. I got a phone call to be the head of an agency. And I had never worked at an agency. I had criticized agencies. Actually, I'd been an industry critic of agencies, believing that they were somewhat of a barrier to the progress that I was trying to drive as a media owner. And one of the CEOs of the agencies found that criticism to be a compelling reason to hire me because he wanted somebody who had been on the other side and could help sort of influence from the inside out. And so I went to run which is a media agency within IPG, which is one of the 5 holding companies, and loved it. I found it to be the, incredible talent, curious people, very bright, the best team sport, right? You win together, you lose together, you're always pushing each other to be better. It was a really, really fun career. And then from there I got, you can see I just get a phone call and I sort of leap. That's not really what happens, but if I get intrigued and I'm ready to learn again, I can want to consider it. And I got a phone call from Bloomberg, which, not unlike Martha Stewart, you've got an entrepreneur who has built an incredible enterprise. And they have, Mike has a media division, and the intent at that time, he was just completing his final term as mayor. And the intent was to really accelerate the media organization. And again, print, digital, events, online, he had all the capability. And so I went to do that. And was at Bloomberg for 4 years, worked on the media side, and then took his advice and moved into the mothership of Bloomberg as his deputy COO across the core business of Bloomberg, which is obviously a financial services firm. And then 4 years in, I woke up one morning and realized how much I missed the agency world. So I decided to come back in and chose Dentsu, and have the privilege now to work across our capability at Dentsu, running the Americas.
Well, let me tell you, I'm going to ask you a few questions about Dentsu, but let's park back on Mike Bloomberg. Obviously, he's someone who is larger than life in so many ways, was a presidential candidate during this last time. You got to know him quite well working with him. Tell us a little bit about what was that like working with him?
Well, I will tell you, he would have been a great president. We always teased Mike that he may not be a great candidate, but he's an incredible leader. And I think we saw that. I think he'd even admit we saw that. But what I loved about working for Mike is he has this skill, which I think is so impressive when you see it in leaders. He can do what I call go from the balcony to the basement. He's a great visionary, but he can go all the way down to the details of the business. And he wants to meet with the people that are have hands on keyboards. And so his command of up and down that spectrum is incredible. I learned a lot from just watching his precision questioning as he really works to understand his organization. It's a 22,000 person organization now, so it's hard for him to do that, but it's because he can sort of go up and down. He also built an incredibly strong culture. So for anybody who's been at Bloomberg, there's hundreds of offices around the globe. They all look exactly the same. And what they have in common is nobody has an office. Everybody's at a desk in open space, and every desk is exactly the same size. So it's not like Mike has the double wide, right? Everybody has the exact same space. And there's no doors on even conference rooms. There's no doors. Everything is about transparency because the organization was built on providing transparency to the global financial market. So that was represented in the culture. And as a result of that sort of open floor plan, Mike always had a chair right at his desk, and anybody was welcome to come and sit at the chair. So if you had a question, you just go ask him. And it was really fun to see. I sat opposite him, and to see the number of people that would come and just want his feedback on something. And then the final point I'll make about him that I think is just impressive for those of us who have the ability to give back. I mean, he has built a foundation that is, he's incredibly committed to helping to support the COVID crisis, climate change. When Trump pulled out of the Paris climate agreement, Mike's the one who funded the means to stay in that. The opioid crisis. He does so much to help support our city. So it's really impressive, the change he's making from a philanthropy perspective.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that insight into this person that everybody knows quite a bit about, but not really what it's like to work with him or for him. So thanks for that. Tell us about Dentsu itself. You mentioned the 5 holding companies. It's one of those holding companies, right? And so how does that work? Tell us the advertising holding company world, and then what role Dentsu plays in that, and how it came to be. You told me an interesting story the other day about that.
Yeah, so Dentsu is interesting in that it's the oldest holding company. It was formed in 1901 in Japan, ironically by a Japanese journalist who realized in order for journalism to be successful, it was going to have to be funded by advertising. So he started an advertising agency. It's also the youngest in that we've grown through acquisition. So it wasn't until 2012 that Dentsu out of Japan begun to acquire agencies internationally. And today we are, the international business is 65% of the total. So it's an incredibly inquisitive network that's now integrated this capability. It's a benefit to us and our clients though, because we acquired these companies in a digital age. We have incredible capability that, if you were acquiring back in 80s or 90s, you would have acquired very different companies then. So the breadth of our capability is really special for our clients. A couple of examples of that would be our identity capability. We acquired a CRM firm called Merkle in 2016 that has deep knowledge of consumers. We like to say we know consumers better than anyone by virtue of this identity capability. And we fuse that into our creative development and our media planning in order to really help our clients grow their own brands and understand their clients better.
Excellent. And so as CEO, kind of how big is the empire, the CEO of Dentsu for Americas? How big is the operation that you run?
Yeah, so globally, Dentsu International is about 45,000 people, and in the Americas we have about 12,000. We're about 45% of the revenue of Dentsu International, and that's across creative, what we call creative, which is your typical advertising development, both for all forms of creative, including events. We have our media, and then we have what we call CXM, which is where we have technology enablement, CRM. User experience, lots of different technology enablement there. And then we have divisions that help create solutions across the top of that.
And so of those 12,000 right now, how many of them are like you working from a home office and you're actually in the office? And then we'll kind of talk about where's this going, but where are things right now?
So we have all been remote since Friday, March 13th was the day that we all went home to test our technology to see if it would stand up. And we ended up not going back. We have a few that are in offices because of the production equipment they need, or in a couple of instances where their ability at home is just not is compromised, where they prefer to work from the office. But 99.9% of us are working in this environment, and to the credit of our teams, doing it very, very well. I think we have found this to be productive. We have pitched new clients remotely, and we have, in developing chemistry on a screen is a very different proposition for those of us that are doing that. But I think we've learned a lot about ourselves and a lot about how we can team independent of being in the same room.
And when you think about the changes in the location that you've all adapted to, what additional changes will be permanent? You'll go back to work at the offices to a large degree, but what has changed in the marketing and advertising world as a result of COVID that you don't see actually going back, or not going back to the same it used to be?
Yeah. Let me answer that in two ways. So we do as early as the last week in March. So right after we went into this environment, we started doing a tracker study that we call the Navigator, that is testing consumer sentiment in terms of what are the behaviors that we don't think are going to go back. And there's a couple that have stayed pretty steady throughout this time. One is around commerce, how we are all shopping. If you think about your groceries is probably the best example. And my sense is some of that will not go back. People have now gotten used to a new way of getting products and services that is more convenient, not necessarily any more expensive, and saves time. So I think that is an example of one. The others that are interesting is telehealth. If you think about how people are getting health advice and engaging with whether it be mental health or whether it be physical check-ins, I think that we are launching a new division of our organization called Dentsu Health. We were going to do that anyway, but I think it's even more important because I think consumers and how they think about healthcare is going to be very different. So those are two examples. in terms of work ourselves, we don't plan to ever go back to the way that we were. We have 90, almost 100 offices across the country, across the region. So that includes Latin America and Canada. And I'm looking to either sublet or release at least half of those. So we're working very diligently to change our real estate footprint, recognizing that a lot of our teams want to have a hybrid, or they actually want to relocate to new places and do their work from there, which to the degree we can support them, we're willing to do that.
And how does that impact your ability to recruit nationally for what otherwise would be a local position?
Yeah, I'm super excited about it because I think it gives us access to talent. Well, there's a few benefits. It gives us access to talent that we may not have had before. Really important as we continue to work to diversify our populations, and we can talk a bit about that because it's a really important initiative in any company that we work with. And the other is just the cost of work, right? So 85% of my cost is people, and a majority of our people are in the most high cost areas: New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA. Those are the 4 biggest pockets for us. So the degree to which I've got people who want to move to the lower cost areas, that's certainly a benefit to us. It's a benefit we can pass on to our clients. And if we can make that work for them and it's a better lifestyle for them, we're happy to do it.
Excellent. You talked about geographic diversity, but also you and I talked about ensuring that your teams are reflective of the population,
Yeah.
and the expectations that you're finding in clients in that regard as well. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was referring to ethnic diversity because it broadens where we can recruit from in that comment. I think that as an industry, I think the ad industry has always put a high priority on diversity and inclusion. But I think, like most companies this year, no matter how committed you were to that, you sort of look back and reflect and you realize that it was incomplete. And in our case, I think that if I were critical of us, I think we had great programs, but we might have gotten distracted with a lot of activity that may or may not really have been driving the progress that we needed. And so we have gotten very focused on making sure all of our leaders have diversity, equity, and inclusion plans in terms of how are they changing the complexion of their teams, how are they recruiting differently. Some of the obvious things like having diverse slates of candidates and requiring diverse slates of interviewers against those candidates, and having very smart calibration sessions. So you're really talking about the talent, recruiting very differently. In fact, I'm working with the Institute for Media, Sports, and Entertainment at Pepperdine to think about how can the Institute actually help think about areas of research that can help us understand what's preventing us from diversifying fast enough. What are programs we could put in place to do that? So there's some fun work happening right now with Pepperdine on that. But I think that it's a huge priority to our clients because they're marketing to diverse consumers. And so if they're not reflecting that in their ads, if we're not reflecting that in the teams that have the experience to help create those ads with that in mind, it's super important that we're not perpetuating negative stereotypes, and we're actually changing stereotypes as we go to market.
Right. And consumers seem to have evolving expectations as to social responsibility and as to kind of behavior and statements from brands. How is that being reflected in what you're seeing?
Yeah, so that's actually, if I go back to your question about one of the things that's changed that's lasting, that's one of the changes that I think will be lasting is consumers' expectations that brands will have a point of view. So, no longer, if you see the murder of George Floyd, the expectation from consumers is brands will have a point of view on that. They want them to have a point of view. They'll vote with their dollars. And so I think that, and not all brands are comfortable with that, but we do work with brands that have done incredible work. Procter & Gamble, Oreo are 2 that come to mind that have just done incredible work with their creative as well as with how they think about, the placement of those ads. So I think brands having an ability to have a stance on social issues and really put purpose, they can both grow and do good at the same time. And I think finding that intersection is key.
Yeah, and we're finding that in higher education as well. And in conversations with other presidents around the country, the expectations from students and alumni in particular as to the university taking public stands and statements on social and political issues is increasing. So we're seeing that as a culture shift in a variety of areas.
Yeah, I bet you are, especially with the student body. The younger generation feels that acutely. I see it in my 18-year-old.
And they want to see it reflected not just in email or in letters, but in social media. You quick and kind of clear now in the ways that I want to get communicated with, or I'm used to getting communicated with. What sort of focus is your advertising? Is your advertising on social media? How much does that change in terms of where you're placing ads for your clients as opposed to traditional media sources?
Yeah, it depends on the brand and the objective, but ironically, TV continues to be an incredible, if you're trying to build awareness, it's, on a cost basis, TV continues to be very effective for lots of our brands. But certainly, our D2C brands are primarily social, and performance-based brands are going to be much more.
D2C mean direct to consumer?
Yes, sorry, did not mean to acronym you. Yes, D2C is direct to consumer, and so a lot of brands that tend to be more performance based would be leaning into certainly the social platforms and search, and more so than TV.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to invite Sarah Jackson, our chancellor, into this conversation. While she's getting on, she's been looking through some of the chat questions and she's got some of her own, but let me ask one that just popped up that I thought was quite interesting. If you could remote work from anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Well, I'd have to go back to Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't take the Colorado out of the girl. Yeah, I'd go to Silverthorne, Colorado. I think about it a lot. You can tell that wasn't a hard one for me. Yeah, I love the mountains of Colorado. Maybe Malibu would be a very close second, by the way.
The mountains and sea of Malibu aren't bad either.
I can get the best of both worlds.
Exactly. Sarah?
Welcome, Jackie. So nice to visit with you today. And we're getting a lot of chat about how impressive your career is and just how much they're learning. So thank you for being with us. And also just thank you for the way you've stayed involved with your alma mater through the years, through our entertainment, media, culture, and sports initiative. And you just have continued to help us so much with access and input and advice. So thank you for being an involved alum of Seaver College. I was privileged to be in your home, as you remember, a couple years ago at Christmas time with my husband and my daughter. And it was fun to see Jack and Ashley in your home. And one thing that impressed us was you introduced us to two children that you were hosting and providing a home for through the holidays, through the foster children program. And I know that's dear to your heart, and you can continue to offer a home to foster children. Can you tell us how that started and how in the world do you continue doing that with all your responsibilities as CEO?
Yeah. So, it's my favorite topic. So thank you for asking. And I think, can I just say, I think Pepperdine has the gift of Sarah. I think, you were there, your family historically, but you have just always been such a blessing to Pepperdine and certainly to me personally. So, love being on here with you. We got involved with fostering. And by the way, I'm clear, I do the CEO job, so I can do that. I'm not confused on which one is my priority. And we got involved. There's a couple in Orange County, California, that started a charity called Royal Family Kids Camp. And Royal Family Kids Camp has more than 250 camps across the country. And every summer they give foster kids 1 week of camp, right? And we think about that as not a big deal, but these kids, most of them don't know how to swim. They've not, had the freedom of riding a bike all the time. So there's so many new skills that they learn at this camp. And the foster families get a break, which is hard. As a foster family, it's very hard to get respite care for your kids. So there's really two benefits. And the program goes through churches. So we heard about this through our church. And the purpose of the church is to just love on these kids. So we preach at them all week long, and we pour into them. And our hope is that they walk away with some level of skills and a beginning of a faith that will sustain them in a way that is hard, because they have, it's not for their own fault. They've been born into difficult circumstances. And so it's our way of giving them, hopefully a foundation and support. And during our first year when we did that, which was in 2013, 2014, my daughter, Ashley, our daughter, was 11 at the time. And I got the 11-year-old campers, the 11-year-old girls, and Jack got the 11-year-old boys. And it was fascinating to me to realize that even though the upbringing of my campers was so different than Ashley, they actually weren't different at all as little girls. And when we drove away from camp that week, I said to Jack, we need to do this. Like, we need to become a family that does this. And because he had the 11-year-old boys, he's like, there's no way. He described my camp as kumbaya and his as the fight club. And normally I would just, nag at that and stay at that. And I just said, well, let's both pray about it, think about it. And if you change your mind, let me know. And 2 weeks later, he came back and said, yeah, you're right. We should absolutely do this. We have room in our home. We have room in our heart. So we got licensed. It took us about 6 months to get licensed. And since then we have our 25th child with us now. Little baby who came to us directly from the hospital, and she turns 15 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And I the reason why this is my favorite topic is, I'll give you 2 more stats on this because I think it's important for people to know. 70% of those that are incarcerated in this country were at some point in the foster system, and 50% of the homeless were at some point in the foster system. So if you think about this, the sustainable impact, because the system, it's challenged. I won't say it's broken, but it's challenged. And we need more foster families. We need foster families that don't do it for money. They do it because they have room in their home and in their heart, and they can change the course of these kids. And so I love to try to recruit and encourage people to become a foster parent.
That's so beautiful and so inspiring. Thank you for telling us that. You mentioned your faith. How has your faith impacted your work and your career path? And I mean, clearly it has motivated you to serve, which is one of our ideals at Pepperdine. You're serving as a result of your faith with the foster program. But tell us more about that.
I've always found that I think my faith sustains me in ways, even when I hit a really difficult time in life or in career or with an individual. It gives me, it's optimism and hope and belief. And, I hope it shows up in character. I hope that, and I work in a very diverse organization. So I hope that people know there's something faithful about me, even though I don't necessarily talk about my faith at work on a regular basis. But I hope in my actions and in how I choose to respond, people will see faith in that character. But it's always been incredibly important to me. I can think of many times where you just close the door and say a prayer before you go into the meeting, and I've always felt like I've got a lot of support as a result of that.
That's really beautiful. Thank you so much. What a great example you are as a Pepperdine alum. We're just really proud of you.
Good thing Howard White let me in.
I know. I'm glad Howard White let you in. What a good man. I have one other question too, but we have one from an alum that's saying, what does Jacki do in her spare time, if she ever has any?
Oh, gosh. I cook. I've been cooking a lot. I highly recommend the Instapot and the Ninja. I run. I did the New York City Marathon a few years ago, and I'm convicted to do it every decade. So I got to train up a bit. I love to run. I love to cook. I love to play games. I'm a big game player if the family will join in. I binge watch TV. I do what normal people do. But you know what? When you love your work, I have to say, it makes it, I don't mind working if I have to on the weekend, because I do love what I do.
That's fantastic. That's great. There's another question. 'Tis the season. Would love to hear any special holiday traditions you and your family have.
Great question. So I get teased about this, but I like to hide gifts and do scavenger hunts. So I do these fun clues, and then you have to sort of find your gift, which annoys my daughter at this stage. She used to love it, but now it's just annoying. But I love to do the scavenger hunts. I make really good sticky buns, so we start the morning with that. And we always read. Twas the night before Christmas, before bed the night before. We'll do Christmas Eve service typically versus Christmas Day, and then we stay up and read. And let the clock tick over to Christmas, since I don't have any Santa believers right now, although that might change. But I don't have to, you know, in the old days, we put the cookies out and the milk and everything. And then, you know, we break up the cookies and leave some by the chimney and make sure it looked like Santa really destroyed the place. But we don't have to do that right now.
No, that's right. Oh, that's good. I love that. I wanted to ask you
I think
about
we got time for one more question,
one
Sarah.
more question. Okay, I want to ask you, you've received a lot of accolades through your career, Jacki, but a lot of them have been around being a woman in business. You were #1 on Business Insider's Most Powerful Women list, and then other many accolades and achievements. Tell me about being a woman in business in New York. What have been the challenges? Has it changed in the last decade? I think we have listeners interested in that.
Yeah, sure. And I'll be swift. I know we're at time. So, you know, again, being at USA Today for as long as I was, Al Newharth founded USA Today, and he was even in 1988, Al was really very forward thinking about the diversity. And at that time it was diversity and gender. We weren't talking about ethnic diversity as much, unfortunately. And so I was on the management team, and it was 50-50 men and women, and had ethnic diversity. And so I grew up not ever realizing I was a woman leader. I always thought I was a leader. And it wasn't until later in my career that I realized that I was fortunate. I had a different experience, and I needed to pay that forward in a way. So I will say today, I just finished 2 town halls today with our leadership teams, and the diversity of gender is so clear. I've got so many female leaders across our organization, and so proud of them. But I will say what I've learned is that, you know, the fight for female equality has really left out women. White women have benefited from that. Collectively, women have not benefited from that. And so the work we have to do now is to pull our colleagues, our fellow women forward in that, because we haven't all benefited from that equally. And that's really apparent. It's apparent to my organization. If you look across, you know, even boards, right? There's the big move to put women on boards, but you know, we need to go a lot deeper on that.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining us today. And thank you, Jacki, for sharing your story with us and for giving our community a sense of what it looks like to be a wave that is succeeding and contributing and giving back. We're so grateful for your time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Enjoyed
you.
it.
Well, our next gathering on the Coffee with Jim series is going to be on January 29th, Friday, January 29th, with a graduate of our Pepperdine Graziadio Business School named Bernard Kinsey. And we'll be talking with Bernard about his work at IBM, his pioneering work in diversity, and who is someone who is the owner of the single largest privately held collection of African-American art and artifacts in the world. And so we'll be talking with Bernard January 29th. We'll see you then. In the meantime, be blessed, have happy holidays, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks, everyone.